Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening to
My Nerd World.
Welcome to it, Depeche Mode, the podcast, and I'm your host, Jon Justice. Glad you are with me again this week. If it is your first time here, thank you so much for checking out the show where we talk all things DM. On this week's episode, from out of nowhere, we get another remix from Memento Mori. Artificial intelligence Depeche Mode is both curious and terrifying. I have the audio, and we'll get into your listener feedback. In terms of news for the band this week, they're getting ready to wrap up if they've not wrapped up. I think the final show is tonight. But I know that the band is wrapping up this portion of the European leg of their tour before taking a little bit of time off and then returning stateside to continue the Memento Mori tour. I'm hoping that we'll get a change up in the set list. Now, I haven't seen the show yet. I won't be seeing the band until November in Denver. I do know what the set list is, but I'm hoping for more Memento Mori tracks. And I guess I think back to the devotional tour, the exotic leg of that tour. Different times, less music for the band to choose from back then, but they completely changed up the set design. They changed up the set list. Since they're returning to America, I wonder if, I doubt we'll get a set redesign. I can't imagine that happening. But maybe we'll get a change up in the set list. We'll see. If I were betting, I imagine it's probably going to be the same set that we've been getting, with some of the variations as it relates to the encore and the tracks that Martin Gore has been performing. But the band has been known to change the set list before, so we'll see what happens. I watched a really interesting video on YouTube of the individual who is in charge with the audio for the tour. I didn't understand a lick of what the guy was talking about in describing all of the different technical machinery that he had in which he would process the the music, the vocals, all aspects of the live performance. But it was a really interesting listen nonetheless, even though I had no idea what in the world he was pointing to or talking about. I'm tech savvy, but I'm certainly not that tech savvy. And I'll include a link to it in the notes for this week's show for those that want to go and check it out. So I had really, in the news portion of the show this week, I really just had the AI Depeche Mode singled out for the main content. However, I was not able to do the show yesterday as my internet had gone down for about 24 hours. So I had to hold off until today. And I'm glad that I did, because late yesterday and then overnight, we got another remix from out of the blue. And I can't, this is pure speculation on my part. I can't help but wonder if the potential of a box set that we'll get later in the year that I mentioned last week might include not just the remixes that we've received, but an abundance of remixes perhaps that haven't been released yet. Because this is feeling a lot like the remix disc that we got with Spirit at this point in time. They're just doing a slow rollout of these remixes, considering we've got Ghosts Again, Wagging Tongue, and then we have these one-off remixes of My Cosmos Is Mine, and then the one that was released this week of Speak to Me, which is pretty interesting. Like, I would be excited to get an entire Memento Mori remix album in the vein of what we have been getting with the quality of the remixes that have been released. Now, again, these are not remixes that I would like to hear. As I've said many times, I'd rather hear sort of the classic extended versions of what we used to get back in the 80s of these remixes. However, revisiting the Anna remix of My Cosmos Is Mine, the remix package of Wagging Tongue, certainly over Ghosts Again, but there are some remixes in there you could pick. and this one here from Speak to Me that's really interesting. I think it would be cool to get an entire remix package that takes the album and sends it in this dance direction of these remixes. You'd have to handpick which ones from the collection of Ghosts Again and Wagging Tongue remixes, honestly. I can't imagine Speak to Me being an official single any more than My Cosmos Is Mine was. Nevertheless, High Low presents his remix of Depeche Mode's, and they say recent hit Speak to Me, which is weird because it hasn't really been released apart from the album. So to call it a recent hit, I think that wording's a little odd. High Low is honored to present his remix of Grammy Award-winning legendary English electronic music band Depeche Mode's Speak to Me, a song from their 2023 album Memento Mori. I'm reading this from themusicessentials.com. For his remix, High Low, whom I never heard of until this time, but I don't follow dance music anymore either, uses the original melody as a bass, building a thick wall of techno over the top and alongside Dave Gahan's signature vocals. High Low respects the poignant message within the lyrics and allows them to remain a focal point while following through an entirely new instrumental vehicle. The remix follows his recent 2022 High Low releases, and it lists off a bunch of tracks that he's released as of late. It's an absolute honor to do a remix for the iconic Depeche Mode, especially for such a special song like Speak to Me. The song felt very honest and real to me, so I tried my best to stay true to the original, but also put my own twist on it. I built around the vocals and the synth pads with a more melodic approach than the usual peak time techno stuff I am producing, but still incorporated some earth-shattering yet warm-sounding bass synth and some heavy drums to take it to a different realm. Thanks to Dave and Martin for trusting my vision, says High Low. And his comments really do reflect the nature of this track. I've listened to it a few times now, and while it takes the song in a completely different direction, I'm reminded of the Higher Love remix that was released on the In Your Room CD remix package, where they just took that song, which had a similar flow in terms of being more ethereal and atmospheric and a slow track, and turn it into more of a dance track. It works better for Speak to Me than it did for Higher Love, absolutely. There's a little bit of playing with Dave's vocals on the track, obviously to condense them to have it fit better with the increased speed of the beat of the track, but it works. It takes away the more emotional impact of the song and the way that Dave sings it, but I found it absolutely enjoyable, and it'll be landing on probably my playlist when I go out for a ride, and if I were to be putting together, obviously, a complete remix package of Memento Mori, this would be one of the tracks that I would include. I also found it interesting because Dave had mentioned in an interview that he gave the producers of James Ford and Marta Solongni basically free reign to create the music for it. He laid the vocals down, I think, just over a very basic track to get the vocals right in terms of the tempo, and then handed it over to Ford and Solongni and basically said, do what you want, and they created the entirety of the music around the song, which is fascinating to me that Dave would hand over this track, and not that he would allow them to do this, but that he had very little in terms of the way that the song would end up sounding apart from his writing it and the tempo portion of it. And he even ended up giving them both the writing credit in the liner notes for the album. And I bring that up because that's kind of what's happened here. It's as if Dave would have handed High Low the same thing that he handed, and perhaps they did, the same vocal with just the backing track to keep the tempo to High Low to create this different version of the song. Now, certainly it doesn't fit with the overall feel of Memento Mori, this version that High Low has created, but still nonetheless very similar to the way that the original was created as well. I also like the fact that there really aren't a lot of lyrics in Speak to Me, so he decided to go and repeat them in the song, and I actually appreciated that quite a bit. Just because I like the song and I enjoy the lyrics, and it didn't seem redundant in the way which it absolutely could have, given the fact that he was repeating the same, basically the entirety of the song within the song. It didn't sound redundant in the least bit. So if you haven't had a chance to check it out yet, it's available for streaming now on whatever music platform, Spotify or iTunes that you happen to use. I will add one more thing. It does have me wanting these physical releases again. There is a listener feedback this week that I'll talk about that talks a bit about the release politics around this around the singles, releasing of the vinyl, and why we're not getting physical releases of these. And as I've mentioned many times, just because of what a special time period this is for Memento Mori, I don't think the band could have expected to have this type of success so late in their career, and it speaks to the genius of the band that they've been able to do that. I really, really wish we were getting physical releases with specific Anton Corbijn artwork. It would round out this time in Depeche Mode fandom. And who knows, maybe later this year when we get some of these unreleased tracks and potential of box sets and other releases, Strange and Strange 2 on Blu-ray, as I mentioned last week, then maybe we'll get some sort of physical release of at least a collection of these singles. I just find it very interesting that we've got these remix packages for Wagging Tongue and Ghosts Again, which is more traditional in terms of a single release, and yet we have these one-off remixes of these tracks that are more, I forgot what they called My Cosmos Is Mine, sort of an introduction track. It wasn't necessarily a single. I never would have expected to get a remix of Speak to Me, which has me wondering what other songs from the album have they handed over to remixers, and especially with the Don't Say You Love Me stinger at the end of the Wagging Tongue video. I think a lot of us are expecting that that's going to be a video, if not another official single from the album. So we'll have to wait and see. All right, now let's get to this, and this is both curious, fascinating, and terrifying all at once. So on Twitter, and this is the extent of what I know of where this came from. At ultra_Depeche tweeted out a few days ago. Posted on X. Going to have to pay $1 to Elon Musk every time I do it wrong. This was posted on X. Will Depeche Mode exist in the future? Here's what it's like to hear Dave Gahan's AI voice. Brace yourself. I had originally intended to pull a fast one on you. And I was going to say on the show that I have brand new Depeche Mode music to play for you and play for you this 2 minutes and 9 seconds. I decided not to do that because it's a lot more interesting to go into listening to this, knowing this is AI and what they can accomplish with AI. Now, a friend of the show, Jon Justice, I believe he mentioned this on X. If not, it was in the thread that I posted where I reposted ultra_Depeche, their tweet that had this. I'm sorry, their post that had this. I believe these may be Division songs. I'm not familiar with Division. I think it's how you say it, Division. I'm familiar with them in terms of they make music that's like Depeche Mode. I'm not familiar with any of their music in and of itself. So somebody had mentioned that these are actually Division songs where they went ahead and used AI to replicate the vocals. So with all that said, here is artificial intelligence, Depeche Mode, and Dave Gahan.
Should you pray to die? It's always on your mind. The way before the end, and no one's land, all the people cry. And you pray to God, fly but silent talk. Playing for the end, if the ones stand or people die. Life can be a blessing in disguise for those who know how to live it right. Forget about the future and the past. Only this moment will forever last.
As I said, it's both curious and terrifying at the same time. Consider this. That's probably the worst that AI replication is going to sound. It's only going to get better in the future. When I first heard it, I was immediately reminded of the era around Exciter, because that was probably the last time when we were still getting quite a few leaks of music. Afterwards, I think the labels got more clever and were able to keep the albums buttoned up in a way they didn't before, apart from Memento Mori, which one day I will tell the story. It is completely understandable how that ended up leaking out the way that it did. Not the way that it used to leak out back in the day. But I remember when tracks would leak out during the Exciter period and before, often there would be songs that would be put out in the lead up to a new album that would be done by other bands that people would claim it was new Depeche Mode, whether it was Division. Somebody else had mentioned, Color Theory was the one that I had mentioned. And on X, some people had thought that I was blaming these bands as leaking their own music to try to fool fans, and that's not what I meant. Other individuals were grabbing Color Theory, Division songs, potentially Red Flag, putting them out there because they weren't as well known and trying to pass them off as being new Depeche Mode songs. There was one Ponytail Girl, and friend of the show, Jon Justice, had pointed this out, and I remember that, where people were saying the Ponytail Girl was a new Depeche Mode song, and it wasn't. My point is, in the future, provided there is going to be more Depeche Mode in the future, I mean, now how are you going to be able to tell? You could take those songs, if you had released those snippets, apart from the last few, which weren't the last two samples there of that 2 minutes, weren't quite as good as the first part of it. I mean, you could have passed those off as demos. The music would have been the giveaway of saying, okay, that's a demo. But that sounded like Dave. I mean, that absolutely sounded like Dave. And I guess the question that I have, and these are sort of hypothetical, unanswerable questions at this point in time, is that, what does that mean when it comes to what music we'll get in the future? What will people do with technology like this? If this was the case of, say, Division, and these are Division songs, and somebody has the program, they fed it the lyrics, they fed it Dave Gahan, the AI created it, got the melody right, placed it on top of the music. And AI, I'm not AI savvy enough yet to know this, but I imagine it's probably at a point where if you tell AI, I want this to sound like Depeche Mode with Dave Gahan on vocals, here's the song, and you feed it in, it probably spits that right out. I mean, AI has reached that level now. You could do this with anybody. You could have Depeche Mode doing Taylor Swift songs. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. You could create your own music and lyrics. Now, I think that would probably be a little bit more difficult. I'm sure you could program the AI to, I want this to be a particular tempo, and the AI could generate the melody. I don't know where it's at yet. And if there's anybody listening who does and is a little bit more, or let me say, is knowledgeable, because I'm not knowledgeable on this yet, as it relates to emerging AI and what it can accomplish and what it can't accomplish, I do imagine that what I'm speculating on, if AI is not capable of doing this, it will be capable of doing this in the future. But conceivably, we could have, for the sake of argument, let's make this not as nefarious, and let's just say Depeche Mode fans who want to hear new Depeche Mode music, and they are going and creating a whole host of songs that are essentially covers using AI, and it sounds like Dave, because that sounded like Dave Gahan. I mean, that's really interesting and fascinating, but at the same time, it's kind of terrifying. And I wonder how people are going to respond, because I don't know. Like, there's a part of me that goes, that's not genuine Depeche Mode, and therefore I don't want to listen to it. But there's also that little part of me that goes, well, if you put together some really good music behind it and the production quality is really good, why wouldn't I want to hear a Taylor, just for the sake of argument, I'm bringing up Taylor Swift. Why wouldn't I want to hear a Taylor Swift song sung by Dave's voice, or an artificial Dave's voice? If it sounds like Dave's voice, I love Dave's voice. Why wouldn't I want to hear that? It creates this very interesting conundrum in my mind, and I'm thinking to myself, this is something that we as fans will have to contend with. Now, less so when it comes to Depeche Mode of this next point, because both Martin and Dave are getting on in years. We're all sitting back and wondering, even though Memento Mori has been a massive success, you could make two different arguments. You could say, one, the band's going to go out while they're on top by having done what Dave's talked about so many times of always wanting to produce a better album. Well, this was pretty damn good. Or they could be like, hey, you know what? Let's get back into the studio and let's create more music, if we're all so blessed to see that happen. But when you look at younger artists that are going to be around much longer than our beloved Depeche Mode, I mean, what is going to happen in the future, and what are they going to need to do in order to protect their own quality of work? I mean, you could get saturated with songs of your favorite artists that are going to be around for years as fans go and wait for official doing that thing with my, authentic doing that thing with my fingers, music from 30 Seconds to Mars, you name whatever band, Billie Eilish, right? I'm not a Billie Eilish fan, but she has a rabid fan base and a very unique voice. I'm sure that they would love to hear more songs in her voice, which they will be able to do with AI. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I don't have any answers. I'm just posing all the questions because, again, I'll just play this a little bit at the beginning of this. I mean, this sounds like Dave.
Should you pray to die? It's always on your mind. Way before the end, and no one's land, all the people cry.
Now, here's one for you. I'm going to leave you with this, and then we're going to get to some listener feedback. And I'd be curious if you agree with me on this as well. Dave's vocals have changed throughout the years, in my opinion. Dave Gahan from the Music for the Masses era, the Violator era, while he still sounds like Dave now in the Memento Mori era, he does sound different. He's older. His vocals are different. Would you be because I would be interested to hear it. I would love to see AI go and take a 1987 vocal version of Dave Gahan, because I imagine you can do this. If you feed the AI, I just want AI to focus on Dave's vocals, because you have to give it something to draw from, right? They do this with deepfakes all the time. They have to feed the machine a whole bunch of visuals so it can recreate the deepfake of the individual. So I just want Dave Gahan vocals, say from we'll do 87 to 90. So we'll do Music for the Masses and Violator. But I want it to sing Memento Mori songs. I would be fascinated to know what that would sound like. But again, is that wrong? Right? There's almost a moral issue going on here in my mind. I don't know. I would love to, if I had the chance to interview Martin and Dave. This is one of the things that I would ask them. How do you feel that your voice is being replicated with AI? How do you feel about that? I would be really interested to hear what Martin and Dave had to say with regard to that. And I also want to hear from you. Email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com. I'll share those on next week's show. And once again, I thought this is going to be a really short episode. I only have a few things to talk about, and I'm almost a half hour in. It's because I go blah, blah, blah. All right. Let's get to your listener feedback this week. First off, this comes from Jorg. Hope I'm saying that right. You and a lot of other Depeche Mode on vinyl fans wonder about the release politics around the singles. Well, rather than 12 inches with the remixes, or rather the 12 inches with the remixes. Even though the quality of the remixes is pretty poor, that's at least in my personal opinion, the vinyl is wanted to complete the collection. And I totally agree with that, which is why I would like more physical releases of the singles on CD. I would like to complete my collection because I don't collect the vinyl. When I walked with the dog the other day, I had an idea that the accompanying remixed 12 inches will be published in a box, just like the re-releases of the already previously released mixes of Ghost Again and Wagging Tongue, and a third, maybe fourth single that might all come in this box and not separate. If they'd sell it separately, some people might buy only 2 or 3 of possibly 6 to 8 records. If they all come in one box, fans would have to buy the box with all 6 to 8 records. So many fans bought the boxes, even if they had the 12-inch already on their shelves. And the Memento Mori boxes will be sold even more, I am sure. In this way, Martin and Dave, the management and the record company, are able to grab the most money that they can. And I really do think, just to stop George's email here really quick, I really do think that it just comes down to the economics of producing physical releases, where they're just not going to sell nearly as many physical releases as they used to. When it comes to the fact that so many people are streaming, really the hardcore fans, the cost of production to put out a bunch of CDs just doesn't match the desire, regardless of whether or not you or I would go and purchase them. And I believe I've made this point before on the show. He goes on to say, I wonder how much each box will be, especially with the knowledge of the cheeky prices of the Memento Mori double album and the ridiculously overpriced concert tickets. Many people are not happy about the prices of the Memento Mori tickets. But, well, as long as the concerts are sold out and the people are able and willing to pay those prices, Martin and Dave do not have to intervene like Robert Smith did. I won't be able to go and see them live during this tour. Oh, that sucks, as I've seen them many times before, especially in the 80s and 90s. I'm a little sad, but not too sad about it. Life goes on without Fletch, without attending a DM Memento Mori gig. If you think of the chorus, everything counts. Of Everything Counts, it's unfortunately to say that Depeche Mode became more and more their own caricature. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I don't necessarily disagree, and it reminds me a bit of the other podcast that I do, my Star Wars and pop culture podcast, and how George Lucas initially was an independent filmmaker. And because of the popularity of the films, he ended up becoming the very thing that he had the rebellion fighting back against in his original 2 trilogies. And of course, he built an empire, and then he ended up selling that empire, which makes sense because to me, George Lucas ended up at the end of the day kind of sticking to his own guns. He'd said all along when he was making the original Star Wars movie that he wanted to be independent. He didn't want the studio meddling, and he had a lot of problems when they were making The Empire Strikes Back because the studio was trying to meddle because it became so popular. Eventually, he had to give in, but at the end of the day, he went and sold it. Of course, he went and sold it to a massive monopoly like Disney, but that's a whole different story. George goes on to say, on the German site depechemode.de, people spread the rumor news that there might be another best of compilation and that the 4 missing tracks will appear on this. And this could be a combination, in terms of the rumors going around. This could all be part of the same rumor of what I mentioned last week as well, as far as my speculation is concerned. Whether it's a best of compilation or a box set, whether it includes the Blu-ray for Strange and perhaps Strange 2 as well. All right, he goes on to say, it's all possible, In this case, there would be at least a kind of reasonable matter to buy a best of 2, but will they ever be as great as Martyr, the single of the previous best of number 1? By the way, was Martyr released in a 12-inch box? I don't believe that it was. Martyr was an interesting single release, because from what I remember of when that came out, that was intended to be on Playing the Angel, but they felt that it was such a strong track, they wanted to release it separately. I think the mentality was that Martyr was going to be something akin to what happened with Shake the Disease, where it didn't end up being on an album, it ended up being on the compilation, which at the time in Europe was a singles, and here in America it ended up being the catching up with release. It seemed as if they were trying to replicate that, because Shake the Disease ended up becoming, fairly popular. That being said, Martyr wasn't as big of a hit as I think the band was thinking it was going to be. And that commentary, I think, was the commentary that was around, that was on the disc, the DVD that came with the best of compilation, where they went through all of the singles and the videos. Apparently, he goes on to say, the 4 unreleased tracks are Life 2.0, we know that for sure because Martin mentioned it, Other Side, Angel, and Likeness. He goes on to say, I take no responsibility for the correctness. Other Side, Angel, and Likeness, I believe that those titles are being looked at as the other unreleased, fully produced tracks from Memento Mori, because that's what ended up on the European, I forgot, the production website that shows that these songs have been produced and the legalities around it. There's some songs listed on there that no one's been able to account for, and I think Other Side, Angel, and Likeness are the 3 other tracks on there. But some people have speculated that those could have been placeholder names for some of the tracks off Memento Mori, but I haven't done much digging on that particular website since the album came out. So, and then he wraps up with, let me add this. For me personally, it makes no sense to put these 4 tracks on another best of. I agree with you. Another track I seriously wonder about is the cover of Sundown. I really like the version they did with the BBC Orchestra, almost as good as their cover of U2 So Cruel. But all these tracks may appear in the remix vinyl box. Then I might have to think about going and getting the box. Well, rather not. In these days, as a DM fan, with limited funds, you get used to abstinence. I wish Martin and Dave the best of luck and health to live up to the loads of money they make. Keep up with the good ideas. All the best to you and yours. John writes, Jorg. Last he says, P.S. People are good. Yeah, I forgot about Sundown. So again, sort of lending a little bit more to the potential of a box set with those songs. I do recall that initially, before the BBC piano session, that Sundown was supposed to be a B-side on one of these singles, and of course that didn't end up happening. All right, next we hear from Melissa, who says, I love hearing people's lists. This would be the 10 Depeche Mode songs in 30 seconds. Also, you're the second person I've met recently who has a bicuspid aortic valve. I do as well. Had never heard of it before, and I found it by accident. And I exchanged some messages with Melissa, and she said that she was having hers monitored. She had not gone through surgery. I had never heard of a bicuspid aortic valve until 2009 when I had my heart attack, and they told me that you have a bicuspid aortic valve, and that's why you ended up having a heart attack, which subsequently greeted me in later years with 3 open heart surgeries. I am very happy to say, though, that I'm feeling fantastic at the moment, and I had a checkup, just last month and a half ago, and everything's good, and I don't have another checkup for a year, so that's fun as well. Thank you for that. Lastly, second to last, Michael Henry writes simply 5.1 albums. This was in reference to the rumor of the box set and other releases later this year. Yeah, I would love to get the rest of the album releases in 5.1. I would love to get the rest of the album releases in remasters like we got up until Ultra. I don't think it's going to happen. I just get the feeling that particular period of time is over, and the individuals and the label that surrounded the project of putting all of the albums out on the double disc set of the remastered CD along with the 5.1 versions is a thing of the past, and it goes back to demand. I think fans like you and I would certainly go and gobble these up, but right now, CD's kind of a dead format for everybody. So unfortunately, I don't know. I'm sure you could put out something streaming on 5.1 in terms of, maybe something you could purchase online to listen to at 5.1. But I would, I'd love the fact of, I'd love to have another hard copy. And Jason writes something similar here. He says, exciting to hear about the possibility of releases to look forward to in the run-up to Christmas. I really hope we see something akin to the albums mixed in 5.1 SACD with a making of disc. Yeah, me too. For me, out of all the various reissues they've done, those releases are the best and most worthwhile they ever did, even down to the packaging. To see the remaining albums released in the same format would be amazing. Memento Mori in 5.1, I would imagine, would be an amazing audio experience. And for a touch of more nostalgia, I was flicking through YouTube to try and find a performance I remember from years ago on TV here in the UK with Anton on drums for DM. I found it, and it's brilliant. To your point of, again, what I was mentioning and what you mentioned, I'm with you 100%, and that's one of the things that I loved about the reissues was it kept the original artwork intact for those reissues. I know for vinyl fans, everyone's been really happy about getting these complete vinyl box sets for each album. I like the fact that they're all very consistent in terms of their artwork in utilizing the original art, but going and doing a redux on it. It has the imagery, but it has the solid color look with the artwork itself being black on the cover. I like how it looks, and I don't collect it, so it doesn't matter to me. However, that being said, the remastered versions that came with the 5.1 disc and the making of, I love the fact that they kept the art the same. You had a sleeve that had all the original artwork on tact. The actual gatefold packaging kept all the original artwork on tact. That's intact. The only thing that was different were the discs themselves. They used artwork from the album, but they did not look like what we originally got in the original albums. But that being said, I thought that was really cool because it kept, to me, the essence of what made those releases special when we first got them, just giving us a deluxe package of them as if these could have been released at exactly the same time when the album was released. Last point I'll make on that is I really enjoyed listening to the 5.1 versions of all those albums up until Ultra. I always struggled a little tiny bit because I'm such a purist when it comes to Depeche Mode releases, and mentally, this is a minor quip, right? This is just, but again, I'm going to point it out anyways. Listening to them and kind of knowing in my head, this was not how the band intended the songs to sound. Like, these were not recorded and mixed and produced to be listened to in 5.1. This is a reinterpretation of all the existing music and then separating them out to give you a completely different experience. And while it is an official release, I remember listening to it going, okay, this is really interesting as an experiment, but my default will always just be the standard left-right channel listening to these tracks. It was, oh gosh, which one was it? It was Question of Lust on Black Celebration. I remember listening to in 5.1, and it was one of the moments where I heard it, and I could have swore that I was hearing something that was not in the original track. And then I went back and I listened to the original track, and I realized that it was just something that was buried in the mix. So if you have a chance, go and listen to, and if you have the setup to do it, listen to the 5.1 of Black Celebration from the remastered re-releases, and you'll hear what I'm talking about. There's a portion in the song that repeats. It's a particular effect, and it's brought really, really prominent up to the forefront in the 5.1 mix, but it's buried in the regular version on the album. It really adds a different element to the song, and I'll have to go and give it a listen myself, because it's been quite a few years since I've gone and listened to that. So thank you for the email, Jason, and inspiring my commentary. And thank you for checking out the episode again this week. If you want to find out more about My Nerd World, you can go to mynerdworld.net. And of course, as always, if you like to read and you enjoy science fiction and you want to support My Nerd World, I hope you'll take a moment and check out my science fiction adventure series, EMBARK. It's written for adults, but it's great for ages 11 plus. If you like your science fiction to be epic with a little bit of romance filled with action, then EMBARK is perfect for you. So go and check it out at mynerdworld.net or at amazon.com. Search for Jon, Jon Justice, and EMBARK. Available in ebook, hardcover, paperback, and audiobook as well. 7 books in all in the series, with references both indirect and direct of Depeche Mode, all while telling an exciting science fiction space opera saga. All right. I look forward to hearing from you. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, or leave a comment up on YouTube. I'll be back again next week. Until that time, I hope wherever you are happy, you are healthy, and you are safe. We'll talk to you then. Bye.
Hello, this is Martin Gore from